Welcome to today's episode of TransformHer, the show where we ignite audacity and break barriers. We equip African women with tangible resources and practical insights for their journey to the C-suite or in their entrepreneurial ventures. The plan is that together we will usher in a new era of inclusive leadership that is bound to drive profound growth across the African continent. I'm your transformative guide, Ifoma Williams. Today, we want to explore transformation, personal and societal transformation, the profundity of realizing purpose. So much to glean today. And we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back on today's episode, which is titled Birthing Purpose, From Thought to Unicorn Reality. We will be speaking to Dr. Esther Longe. Esther, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Esther is everything. I mean, there's no word to describe her. She's a truly inspirational leader and a champion for transformation. Esther does so much, from the 7,000 movement to the Unicorn program, to the Alternative Business School, but I'd let her tell you all about it and how it will truly transform your life. Esther.
Yes.
I know that there are pivotal moments, or there were pivotal moments in your journey that made you a champion for transformation. I want to hear about these pivotal moments. What were they? I suspect one, but what were they?
Thank you so much for having me, Ifoma. This is such a great platform, and thank you for all that you do for women. I think that the first thing I would say is that I was born into a single parent home. And so I was raised by a very strong woman who taught me that there's really nothing that I could not be and do. Now, for those who may know or may not know me, in the year 2006, I experienced a plane crash. I was in a plane crash. No, I did not miss my flight. No, I wasn't on a plane and then I came down. No, I was on a plane that was in flight, and in flight, it came down, it crashed. And that was the plane that had the Sultan of Sokoto, his son and his grandson, October 29, 2006. Now, to be honest, a lot of people think that that's why I'm doing all the things that I do now. And yes, it has given me a platform, but what happened was I had survivor's guilt for 2 years. So I was depressed for 2 years because I wondered, why would God save me such an amazing way, and when so many other people lost their lives. So of the 105 people on the plane, only 9 survived. And of the 9 that survived, only 1 had no injuries. And that was me, to the glory of God.
You had no injuries? No,
I have a mark here, but that's the only thing that I have, yes.
Sorry to take you back.
Yeah.
What sort of altitude are we talking about?
It was already in flight. So the flight was delayed. We took off about 11:15. So this happened like 11:15. And obviously it's been 17 years, so don't quote me time-wise, but we're well on our way, But what we found after the fact was that, because the plane crashed outside the airport. So I thought that with the time that we had taken, I did not know where we landed when we crashed. I thought we could have been in Kano, Kafanchan, or whatever. But what had happened was the pilot had spent time circling the airport, dumping fuel, so that when the plane did crash, it could have exploded, but the explosion was minimal because of the fuel that he had dumped, And I remember then thinking to myself that the plane had broken in half, and some of us were in one part and then there were survivors in another part. But it wasn't until the ADC people came to the house that we realized that the only part of the plane that had survived was the tail end, where the 9 survivors were in. Every other thing was in pieces, so that was an experience.
And okay, every time I hear this story, Esther, I have to catch myself. But surely that must have, because we're speaking about birthing purpose.
Yeah.
You do so much with the Unicorn program,
yeah,
with the Alternative Business School and the 7,000 movement,
yeah,
right? So was that something that led you to say, with this second chance, I want to help people birth their purpose? Or what was it?
So ironically, it wasn't. I'm someone, I used to describe myself as publicly private, right? So people knew who I was, but they didn't really know about me. And that forced me into a notoriety that I was not prepared for, because there were headlines: miracle girl, survives plane crash, Nigerians will come to the house and say second Jesus, and for me at a 21-year-old was a lot of pressure. And so I used to say then that I don't want to be known as the person that survived the plane crash. I want to be known for, doing something like, winning the Nobel Prize or whatever. And I know now in retrospect, it was very stupid, but that was how I felt, that I didn't have anything to do with this miracle. It was literally God's mercy that kept me through that process. And also remember that I was navigating survivor's guilt as well. What is it about this peepsqueak of a girl that, is so noteworthy, that, deacons in my church died, I knew people that died on that plane, but what has led, especially to my nation building movements, entailed me having to forgive Nigeria. Because in the time that we had the plane crash, in that 18-month period, there were 6 air incidents in an 18-month period, from September 2005 till October 2006. In fact, a week after the plane crash, there was a helicopter that went down with the army generals, literally like a week after. So I remember somebody, a high-level person in government coming. So I was on NYC when this happened, and a high-level person in government came to meet me in the hospital bed, because they kept me for 3 days to make sure I had no internal injuries, which I did not. And I remember this high-level person coming to tell me and saying, oh, you have to go back and serve your country. And literally, if looks could kill, because I'm like, I was serving my country when my country failed me.
Because I was a youth corper.
I was a youth corper. Now, and then, anyway, let's not go down, So for me, I used to say then that my passport, so after that, I say my passport was green from Zion. My passport was green from Zion. So, I was one of those who, and I think this is especially pivotal right now, because there's such a, this move for people to leave Nigeria, this Jackpot syndrome, because a lot of people have given up, that there's nothing in Nigeria for me anymore. And to be honest, I was one of those people. I used to tell my husband that even based on my degrees alone, they will roll red carpet for the whole family, not even adding his own. So imagine my surprise in the middle of lockdown, April 1st, 2020. I'm brushing my teeth as you do. And I just felt the Lord say to me, I want you to do a conference in 3 parts called Serving with Integrity, right? And trying to challenge people. So this was how the 7,000 started. Challenging people to stop thinking about individual blessings and move into collective responsibility. And so the first edition we're going to do was Serving with Integrity, which was the government edition. And I was going along the planning process until I couldn't give my heart to this thing, because I had a lot of unforgiveness. I had a lot of anger towards this nation that had not just hurt me, but had hurt other people in the process. And so I had to forgive, the officials. I had to forgive the nation. I had to forgive almost our uncaring nature, and ask myself, I have children. If we leave, we've lived in other countries, you always be a second-class citizen, no matter how amazing the country is.
Yes.
But if we leave, who's going to build Nigeria? What legacy are we going to leave for the people that are coming after us? And so I went from being apathetic about Nigeria to having this burning passion, to the point where they're calling me Miss Nigeria now. And I'm like, Lord, have mercy, shadow me. But at the end of the day, for me, it is about building legacy.
Right. So the 7,000 movement, I want you to tell us about that, right? And, nation building, and then we'll move to purpose.
Fantastic. So the 7,000 movement was inspired by 1 Kings 19, where, so obviously I'm a Christian, and that comes to play in everything that I do. I always tell people that if you're tired of me talking about God, maybe you can save me from a plane crash, then I can talk about you, right? So it was inspired by 1 Kings 19, where, Elijah's having a moment where he feels so alone, where he's like, I feel like I'm the only one that is fighting for this nation. I feel like I'm the only one that's fighting for righteousness, for justice. I feel like I'm the one that is, at the forefront of all of this. And he had a threat that made him say, what is it? I'm not doing it again. And he takes himself into the wilderness. And then he has an encounter. And that encounter, God reminds him that not only are you not alone, there are 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to bow. But for me, there are 7,000 people, literal and figurative, who have not bowed the knee to corruption and vainglory in Nigeria. Yeah. And hitherto, people have been in isolation, thinking that they're doing their good in isolation. And that's what makes it so tough because you feel like you're the only one fighting the battles that you're fighting. And it almost seems like, it's an uphill battle. But when you now move from silos to collaboration, you now realize that, you are in your ministry, or your industry, and there's somebody else in, a different industry who's doing the same thing, recognizing each other and partnering. It takes the load off. It removes the isolation, it removes the loneliness, lets you realize that, look, this thing can be done and it should be done.
And Esther, I want us to dwell on this thing of in Nigeria or in Africa, you definitely have to be corrupt to succeed. Because what I hear you say is, look, if you move out of that isolated space where you think I can't do it on my own, and you find people together, we can lock arms, pull each other, hold each other up, and be more accountable. Esther, let's just unpack this, with what it is you are doing with nation building and what I hear you say about it is possible to do business the proper way. You encounter entrepreneurs. Please take us through that.
Thank you. That's such a good question, because I think that it's on different layers. The first one is individual. Mm-hmm. And like you rightly said, individual integrity is about your character. Who are you when nobody is looking? And I think that one of the things that I like to promote, and I see other people who have the same wavelength, just like your show, is that consistency. Because you never know the day when the answer to your prayers is around the corner. But if you have not been consistent in character, in excellence, in delivering, in doing what you should do when you should do it, the day that your life will change will start like any other day. It will start like an ordinary day. But how you will move from your ordinary life into a life of destiny and purpose is how you have been consistently showing up. And let's use an example, right, of Joseph. And we know Joseph is a biblical character. But Joseph he suffered. He did suffer for like 13 years.
All of the pains.
Right? Exactly, he suffered. But I always say, he had been disappointed in Potiphar's, Potiphar is the one that he was working for.
Yes.
He was disappointed in the palace prison. He could have been like, what's the point? Let me go die in this palace prison.
Yes.
Even when Pharaoh called him, he could just have showed up and hey, what is this? Okay, I want to interpret your dream. No. But the 2 years between when he was forgotten and the day that phone call came, let's call it a phone call, that call came, come and interpret Pharaoh's dream. He had spent it moving from being a dream interpreter into a strategist. He did not waste his disappointment. And a lot of us, we get disappointment and we just close up shop and say, you know what? I'm not going to mess with people. I'm not going to grieve for anybody. All of those things. You don't realize that you're doing yourself a disservice. So he had spent time moving from being a dream interpreter to being a strategist. So he interpreted the dream and said, if I was you, this is what I would do. To the point where Pharaoh looked up and looked down, looked at his court and said, there's nobody that I can give this job other than Joseph. So a lot of times, even as women, we're looking also, we're talking about equity, we're talking about, quotas and all of that stuff, but be a person that they cannot ignore. Be someone who is so good at what they do that when they look at men, they look at women, they look at boys, they look at girls, they're like, this person comes up tops at any point in time. We have to give the person the job.
Just before the break, we are in the studio with Dr. Esther Longe. Esther survived a plane crash over 17 years ago. That out of 150 people who were on the plane, only 9 survived and only 1 person came out unscathed. And that person is Esther Longe. She wasn't Longe at the time. She was in the course of her National Youth Service year. And this unfortunate incident happened. She lived with survivor's guilt, but she came out of it. Esther, a lot of people do not know what purpose is, how to unlock purpose. There are a lot of people who you hear say, I'm a multipreneur. Esther, what is life's purpose? How does one unlock purpose, anointing, uniqueness, all of the things I know you to be and do as a transformational leader? How do I find my purpose? How do I birth purpose?
That's so interesting, because as you were asking me this question, I was like, oh, wow, that's such an interestingly complex question. But I heard this word service, and I realized that actually, if you're a Christian, your purpose is his service. But in life in general, your purpose is service. Is serving humanity in whatever sphere that God has given to you. is service. And I think that that is when your focus, I love what you said about perspective. My mind is still blown. So like I said, I'm going to be writing it down. But a lot of times when you're starting off in life, you're thinking about me. How am I going to eat? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? But you have to get to a point where you move from individual blessing to collective responsibility, where you are on earth for a reason, to live this world better than how you found it. And that is where you enter into legacy building. Now, a lot of people don't cross into that, or they get into it in the latter part of their lives where they're like, well, I've amassed all this money, they now start putting their names on libraries and all of that stuff. But it doesn't have to get to the last 25 years of your life. And that's why you find that the people that they call inspirational are those people who, from an early age, they begin to say, how can I serve? How can I serve? So you have people like Slum to School, Otto Orodam, how can I serve the children? And all of a sudden he's being invited here, and you think, it started from service. It started from service. Even TransformHer started from service. How can I serve these women? How can I empower them? Service. So when you think about all the gifts and the graces that you have been bestowed with, the next question is, how do I use these gifts and graces to serve in the spheres that I have been called to, in the places and spaces that I have been given a voice? So you move from saying, oh, as long as me and my family are okay, as long as to, okay, we're okay, we thank God. How can I now serve? And it's locked in everybody. There is something in you that is different from what is in me, but that thing that makes your heart either swell with joy or burdened with pain is an indication of the place that you are called to bring deliverance to.
Please go through that again. That was profound. Okay.
Whatever is in your heart that either causes you the biggest joy or the most pain is an indication of the area where you're called to bring deliverance to.
Wow. You know why this is so profound? And this is sort of like unbundling even for me. I've said on the show before, ladies, that my first foray into entrepreneurship, I failed effectively and woefully. Then I went into the corporate space, came back and failed. That's worse than the first time. And the burden for me was, okay, so I went to business school, got mentors, became much more disciplined in the financial area and in execution. All right. So what happened? I found that it became a burden, Esther, because I started thinking, when my younger ones, friends, mentees would say, how are you doing it? How did, so even a simple conversation to do with bookkeeping or how a younger sister is keeping her books, I realized what you just said has just unraveled for me. The penny has just dropped. Because indeed, it gives me great joy when TransformHer is blessing, but it's also a burden. Wow. So that is really how you birth purpose.
That's how you birth purpose. That's how you birth purpose.
Esther has said a few things. Individual blessing to collective responsibility. Ladies, leaders, as you are building your enterprise or even on your journey to the C-suite, as an entrepreneur, if you're on the way to the C-suite, you can look at your team around you and ask, how can I gather the gifts and graces I have to serve in the places and spaces that I belong or where I am playing? Esther has gone on to tell us that we must go beyond earning into legacy building. And I guess that's where significance comes in. So in a nutshell, I want you, there's so much. Every time I have a magical woman on this show, ladies, I think what we'll do is each woman now 3 episodes. But Esther, I don't want to lose the essence. I want you in a nutshell to speak to your younger self, to speak to the young woman who is just starting out, or the middle-aged woman who is confused about purpose. From where she is at, how does she begin to realign and discover or define what her purpose is? What steps should she take immediately?
One of the first things, that, and as you're speaking, I remember unicorn, when I was speaking about unicorn, one of the first things is to realize that you're unique. One of the things that we find people say the most is, oh, I just want to be like everybody else. I want to be normal. There's nothing normal about you. And the sooner you embrace it, the sooner you embrace the fact that you are unique and you are here on purpose for purpose, then you begin to unlock the things that God, your creator, has already put inside of you for the blessing of humanity. You highlighted that in different episodes, you've spoken about moving from competition to collaboration.
Yes.
There's no need to compare yourself with anybody else when you realize that nobody can do what you do the way that you do it. When you enter into your uniqueness, when you embrace your uniqueness, then you become that unicorn. And yes, the unicorn is the mythical creature, but the unicorn is also, in finance, it is a startup that is valued at $1 billion. Meaning that inside of you, you are the value. You are not just any kind of value. You are a value that can transform not just your life, your family, your environment, and your nation. And the truth of the matter is we need more women to be transformed so that they can transform their environment. So thank you for TransformHer. God bless you. And we want to see more lives transformed.
Wow, this has been a most insightful episode. I like when Esther says unique onto unicorn. So even if unicorn is $1 billion, that $1 billion value rests in you and you can share it with the world. Thank you for coming on the show, Esther.
Thank you for having me.
It's been amazing having Dr. Esther Longe. We're going to bring her back. I'm sure you can tell there's so much she wants to tell us. Please stay tuned for our next segment, which is our coaching segment on TransformHer. Welcome to today's coaching segment on TransformHer. We're going to be discussing a very crucial topic in effective leadership, and that is executive presence. Executive presence can be called the X factor in leadership. And why is this so? To sum up executive presence in one word would be the word influence. Now, as a leader, you want to get to the point where you influence your team positively so that they act voluntarily towards growth. The only other side or the flip side to influence will be coercion, and that does not make you an effective leader. Now, there are 3 pillars to executive presence, or if you like, 3 dimensions. Each of these dimensions has 5 facets. The first is the character of the leader. This speaks to the leader's ability to instill trust so that his followers or his team members repose great trust in the leader. As I said, each dimension has 5 facets. And so for the character dimension, it speaks to the authenticity, the originality of the leader, then the integrity of the leader, the concern of the leader. By concern, we mean, does the leader really take recognition? Does he recognize? Is he interested in the well-being of his team? The next is restraint. In boiler room situations as a leader, are you able to restrain yourself in situations towards the best possible outcome? And finally is humility. Now I want to go to the next slide and speak about substance, which is the second dimension to executive presence. The first thing you see on the screen is practical wisdom. This speaks to your years of knowledge, technical expertise, and all as a leader. In terms of practical wisdom, how do you apply and show it? Let's go back to the last slide. Humility comes into play here. So you see, even though there are 3 different pillars or dimension of executive presence, they meet and intertwine. And it's your ability to display all of this and live all of this out that makes you a true leader. Back to the substance dimension. After practical wisdom comes confidence. Now, confidence beyond the mere definition of the word. Confidence in executive presence is expanded to a leader who is able to take on other narratives, other perspectives. As a leader, you show confidence and executive presence when you are able to take your own perspective and listen to other perspectives and see if a fresh perspective can emerge. A confident leader is a great listener. And then comes composure, also tying with restraint. How composed are you in situations? The next is resonance. Does your team resonate with you? Do you resonate with their views, their life views, their work views, and their perspectives? Finally, is vision in the substance dimension. A leader must be able to paint a very clear picture of what the vision is and communicate it effectively to his team. The third dimension of executive presence is your leadership style. Now, style here is more than appearance, even though appearance is part of your style. But when we speak about appearance, it is beyond your apparel. Appearance also connotes your energy. What energy do you bring to the room, to situations? How do you rally the troops? And then we speak about intentionality. As a leader, you must be intentional. When you are intentional, you also help your team gain confidence to want to move forward to achieve the set goal or realize the vision. And then you must be inclusive. Do you include your team members in conversations? Do you listen to what they have to say? Do they feel like they are part of a team, or that you are just issuing instructions downwards? Inclusiveness aids growth. The next is interactivity, which is quite similar to inclusiveness. Interactivity, I would say, is the verb. How do you interact with your team? What is team cohesion and communication like? Finally is assertiveness. Now let me pause and draw the clear distinction between being assertive and being arrogant. As a leader, you can be assertive and make your points so that there's no doubt who is in charge, but it does not mean that you have to be arrogant or rude in making your submissions as a leader. So these are the three dimensions or pillars of executive presence. And what happens in leadership is that you work with 360 feedback with your team members to know which areas you can improve upon. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. Through practice, clear feedback, and then putting the feedback to work, you can become that great leader with poised executive presence. Remember, it's the X factor in leadership. Thank you very much. Until next time, it's goodbye.